in every single talking board on ESPN, none of them had him as a first-round talent. They all had him as a 3 through 5 talent. If you talk about his performance, I don't think he worked himself into a top 10 through 20 pick, but I think he worked himself into that 20 through 30 range. And that's why, like, it kind of bothers me that they're bumping Karlaftis down because he didn't do anything to lose his position. And Trayvon Walker, yeah, he's fantastic. He showed out when he had to. It's crazy to think that he's moved that far forward. And there are people that didn't even like this guy 3 weeks ago, and now they're in love with him.
The NFL offseason is a beast of its own, as well, too. The ascenders and the decliners, and they don't ever make any sense as well, too. So,
nope.
Speaking of things that sometimes don't make a whole lot of sense, we're going to move on to the 49ers as well, too. And looking at some of their biggest loss, we're going with Mike McDaniel, the offensive coordinator, because really they haven't lost a whole lot, but losing your offensive coordinator, we'll have to see. And with a new young quarterback starting next year, as we presume Trey Lance will be the guy. Curious to see what that's going to be like with a different offensive coordinator than the one he got to learn under through this last year. Obviously, Shanahan is the ringmaster there, but at the same time, there's certain voices, certain things you hear, certain tendencies, things like that. So we'll see. We look at him as arguably the biggest loss. Biggest addition, they haven't really made one yet as well, too. I mean, I guess maybe not trading Jimmy G for a 5th-round pick is their biggest addition at this point. Like, they're kind of staying homeostasis, seeing what they can do right now. They don't have a 1st-round pick as well, too. They traded that one. Like, their picks are a little bit more limited right now. So when I look at the 49ers draft, mine's pretty simple. Trenches. Just load up. Excuse me, not trenches. Trenches a little bit, but most importantly, I'm looking at defensive back depth. I want to see them bolster up the corners a little bit. I mean, we had Josh Norman playing for them last year at one point. You don't want Josh Norman playing significant minutes for you in 2023. So I'm looking for them to bolster defensive backs, safeties, corners, just get more bodies out there. You got the Rams and the Cardinals in your division. Still got DK and Tyler Lockett. You got to be able to match up with them on the outside. They have some good defensive backs. I think you could get some good mid-round talent that could get in there and just kind of bolster in case somebody goes down, something happens as well. So give me defensive back depth and then trenches after that, because you can never have too many trenches, especially the way they like to play offense and defense.
Yeah, I'm glad you said trenches first and like correct yourself to DB because trenches are a big part of it. But you lose DJ Jones. They also did cut D Ford. Both kind of DJ Jones hurts a lot more than D Ford, which sounds outlandish to say, but D Ford's played 7 games in 2 seasons. So doesn't really impact you much. DJ Jones is a lot more impactful because he actually played games. However, I do think there's enough depth at defensive tackle to find a replacement for him. The kid out of Alabama, Fidarian Mathis in the 3rd round, easily a pick that you can pick up. Their 2nd round pick, I wouldn't be surprised if they go DB. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they reach for somebody. There's a couple names that pop into my head, but I just don't know. I don't know where they're gonna, if they want to reach that far. And the guys I'm thinking, obviously, Riley Moss, injury wise, coming off that major knee injury, but he's going to be healthy for the start of the season. And we saw what he did at Iowa. It helped to give them a top 5 ranking this last season with his defensive abilities. I mean, he's an absolute ball hog at corner. Noah Daniels from TCU, potentially still there in the 2nd round. So I look at something like those 2 guys to potentially, make a name for themselves. But yeah, I think you go DB here with your first couple pick, at least your 2nd round pick, and then beyond that, start filling in defensive tackle, more DBs, and more DBs.
Just load up on whatever you can at this point as well, too. You're in a pretty good spot. So I think they'll be okay there. That'll take us to the final one of the NFC West. We're looking at the Los Angeles Rams as well, too. The reigning Super Bowl champions who have said F them picks, so they won't be picking. Well, they have 8 picks, but none of them in the first couple of rounds as well, too. Look at it.
For a few couple seasons, too.
Yeah, it is. You know what? They might not pick in the 1st round until 2030 at this rate as well. Biggest loss, probably Von Miller, a former Super Bowl MVP who really turned it up in the second half of them as well, too. Biggest addition, of course, it has to be in the receiver room because of that is the Rams' way. Allen Robinson now being signed there as well, too. Finally gets a quarterback he's been looking for as well, too, since the good old Blake Bortles days, and a chance to go in there and play opposite the Super Bowl MVP Cooper Kupp. And Rams, this is actually the one where I meant to say for their draft pick, since you're picking later, this is where I'm looking at trenches. You lost Andrew Whitworth. You're losing. You lost Von Miller. Just offensive, defensive lines, just load up on them. Stafford got banged up a little bit last season. Keep him healthy. Defensively, just try and put bodies next to Aaron Donald. They just have to take up space so Aaron Donald could do Aaron Donald things. And then eventually, that's pretty much what it is for me, is they just got to keep the trenches strong. Their receiver room is outstanding. Running back room's deep. You have your quarterback. Your secondary is pretty good. Just load up on the lines. That's all I can really think of for them as well too. They're a loaded team.
Yeah, and it's funny looking at their draft picks. They only have 3 actual draft picks. They have 5 compensatory picks, though. That's insane to look at. And none of them are before, like, their actual draft picks are 5th and 1 5th and 2 7th round picks. Their compensatories are in the 3rd, 4th, and 6th. But, like, yeah, this is one of those situations where you need depth. Like, you need players at this point in time. You need bodies out there. And they're starting 22. Very good. I mean, just across the board. So you're kind of just looking for backups, guys that you can grow with, and see what you can do there. I agree that you need to start filling in the trenches. For the Rams, I think I focus more on filling in those offensive tackle positions with your earlier picks, the 3rd compensatory, 4th compensatory. I don't know what talent you're going to get there, but they're not going to be they're going to be a rough diamond that you're going to have to work into something, but it's your best chance to get somebody to fill in maybe one day down the road for haven't seen when he decides to walk away. Obviously, Andrew Whitworth just retired. Those are parts that you need to try to fill. And obviously, they're going to try to do it through free agency in the meantime. But I do think if you can get a 3rd and 4th round guy that slips, that's maybe a 2nd round talent, that would be the best way to do it. But looking at that tackle position is where I would be looking at specifically when they get that compensatory pick in the 3rd round.
Absolutely as well, too. I think just keep Stafford as healthy as you can. He's not a spry young chicken anymore who could lose it, who could pop his arm out of socket, pop it back in, and throw a game-winning touchdown pass. Like, you want to keep him as healthy as you possibly can. So we're on the same line for the Rams. So that will do it for our NFC West journey to the draft. Now we're going to head to the AFC West, where things get a lot. Probably the most competitive and dangerous division in football when you look at it across the board. All 4 of these teams should be in the playoffs and should arguably division winners. But there's not a whole lot of draft picks to go around. There's 2 teams have pretty much all of the picks, it feels like, as well, too. So we're going to start there. We'll go and start first with the Chargers as well, too. Los Angeles Chargers, very big movers in free agency, bringing in Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson, who we agree is the biggest one as well, too. Losing Brian Bulaga, who's played, 2 games in the last 2 seasons, it feels like. It feels like he has been primarily injured, so not losing a whole lot, but bringing in some absolute stalwarts on defense, keeping a lot of your guys, keeping Mike Williams coming off that career year, and you still get to keep all of your picks. You're picking at 17, I believe. And looking at it for me, theirs is very, very similar to the Seahawks, but for opposite reasons. You just take the best player available at this point. You really can't go wrong with the way your team is built. You got a quarterback, you got all the weapons, you got defensive playmakers across the board. I think you take the best available player here, honestly, kind of like what you did with last year when you got Rashawn Slater, who slipped to you. That one happened to fill a need, but that was 2 birds, 1 stone. Before that, you got Derwin James, just because he happened to fall to you. This year, I'm looking at someone like Jordan Davis. If he slips, put him right in the middle of that defensive line. They're plugs your run defensive hole. Devin Lloyd slips there. I like Devin Lloyd along with Kenneth Murray in those linebacker spots. I think whatever drops you take here, maybe an offensive lineman like Charles Cross, who's supposed to go really high, maybe he slips for some reason. Take him and put him opposite Rashawn Slater. This one, you really can't go wrong. Just take whoever's the highest on your board at this point, plug and play. Besides receiver. Receiver's the one thing you can maybe pass on if it's the best player on your board, but everything else, just take the best there for you.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. A fair assessment of it. I'll give you that. I stand by what I said in our mock draft 1.0. Jordan Davis, if he is there, you take that man, and you do not let anybody tell you otherwise, because you will solve your issue of defending the run game, or at least mitigate 50% of the runs that you were giving up right through the middle. If he's not there, Devontae Wyatt, the other guy out of Georgia that fills the defensive tackle role, that is still 6'4", 300 plus pounds, that ran the exact same 40 and is a slightly less hired of a jumper than Jordan Davis. But like, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking at those 2 specifically. If for some awful reason they're not there, Kenyon Green has been rumored to fall down some boards. Maybe you slide and go get him. Maybe you go get Zion Johnson out of Boston College, who's been a fantastic combine performer. His pro day looked fantastic as well. So he's been climbing. So he might be climbing out of your reach, but that should help you on the defensive end. I mean, if he climbs higher, that helps you with Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt falling to you. So first of all, I'm looking those 2, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, period, point blank. If they're there, take them. If they're not there, then I look at maybe an offensive lineman who's fallen. And if for some reason none of those guys are available, which if that happens, I don't know what to tell you at that point in time, but maybe you look to trade out and maybe you get later round picks so you can just fill in bodies at that point in time. But I think your number one issue that you're missing is a defensive tackle, and Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, one of those two guys will fill that role, and that should be that simple.
Here's a random idea for you there. There's been rumors about Kyle Hamilton possibly slipping in the draft as well, too. If he somehow drops the to 17, do you take the idea of pairing him with Derwin James, even though it's really low on your needs list, but he will probably be the best available player? Do you consider pulling the trigger there?
Yes. I would like it. Not even a conscionable thought. It is, hey, new signing JC Jackson, sprint this as fast as you can to that table right there, and we're going to make sure we get this pick. Like, you're going to sprint yourself to Las Vegas, hand in this card, and we're going to have this man in 2.7 seconds. And that goes for any team. If Kyle Hamilton falls out of the top 5, which I would be shocked if he falls out of the top 5. But again, you're exactly right. It's been rumored that he is potentially falling out of the top 5. If he somehow falls out of the top 5, any team between where he falls out of the top 5 and where he actually gets picked screws up if they don't pick him. Like that is my pure answer on Kyle Hamilton, and we'll talk about more about him on the big board. But like, yes, if he is here, 1,000%, you take that man.
Very interesting to see if he ends up being someone that slips, just kind of slips all the way down there. That was one I was curious what your thoughts are on that one as well. So we'll definitely see. I think we're kind of in agreement. Chargers, anything you can do to help that run defense or just load up in general, just have more talent than everybody at this point. Because in this division, nobody's running the ball at this point. I mean, looking at this division, there's way too much firepower. So you might win your division even without being able to stop the run the way.
And that's why I said go with. I mean, that's why Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, yeah, they're run stoppers first. But if you watched them all season long, they got after the pass rusher very well. And that's something I think with, first of all, Jordan Davis's ungodly body and athletic abilities, you know that can transition pretty well into an interior defensive lineman wreaking havoc in a pass situation. Or at the very least, you just wreak havoc long enough for a Bosa brother to get to the quarterback. Seems to work for everybody who has a Bosa.
Or a Khalil Mack on the other side as well, too. Just get in the way. Don't let a guard help double team at this point.
If you get one of those two, and they're gonna demand a double team as a rookie, and that's unheard of. I mean, there's been very few defensive tackles in the history of the game to come in their rookie year and demand a double team. The most recent I can think of would be Aaron Donald, but he's kind of a mixed tackle defensive end.
He is not human, so that doesn't even fully qualify.
So really, you're talking about that type of level of talent. If whether it's Jordan Davis or Devontae Wyatt, you bring them in, and they're going to immediately help Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. That's that easy.
Absolutely. With JC Jackson's squad on the back end, you're going to have really good coverage to even get them a little extra time as well, too. So definitely looking forward to seeing what the Chargers pull off here. Next, we're going to go to a team that I'm honestly surprised they have not just one pick, but 2 picks in the first round as well, too, considering they've been kind of trading away and picking the back end. We got the Kansas City Chiefs picking back-to-back at the back end of the first round. Biggest losses, of course, the game breaker himself, Tyreek Hill, being traded to Miami for not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 total picks, including that first rounder that the Dolphins got from the 49ers as well, too, picking at 29. And then the biggest addition, you could say Juju, but I think we were kind of in agreement. I think it's got to be Justin Reed at safety that they brought in from Houston, the young, rangy, just very dynamic safety. I think he's going to do a lot to fill that Tyrann Mathieu role for them as well, too. They'll have him for a while, and I think he's a really good fit. I think he's going to be fantastic. And Juju, really good receiver. I think he's going to be a really good number 2 for him, but they're still looking for that number 1 as well, too. Rumored to be trying to go after DK and Tyler Lockett. So we'll see what they end up doing there, but looking at their draft and those 2 spots, luckily for them, 2 of the things they need the most, I think could be possibly available here. I look at receiver and I look at pass rush. Those are the 2 things for me that stick out for him. So if they keep both of these picks, here's a couple of guys I like for him. I like David Bell, the receiver out of Purdue. I think he could be here available as well, too. I really like George Pickens as well as a guy that could possibly be here, the receiver out of Georgia. 2 guys that I think aren't quite in that Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Drake London sweepstakes, so they might slip a little bit and be really, really productive back into the first round, early second round guys, a la T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, players like that. And then I look for pass rusher. I like your boy Arnold Ibikite. I really like him as that pick number 30 to put him there next to Chris Jones. You've got to get after these quarterbacks in the division. You got to chase down Justin Herbert. You got to chase Derek Carr. you got to deal with Russell Wilson running around backwards and just somehow evading people in ways that don't make sense. Arnold Ibikite is a guy, I think, with his natural athletic ability and his skill set, I think he could be a guy that he could chase down the Russell Wilsons and those guys when they start moving as well. Similar to former Penn State pass rusher as well, too, Odafe Owe, who was taken at around the same spot last year from Baltimore with, if I'm not mistaken, Kansas City's pick when they traded to them too. So I like getting some underrated players like that might be considered second round values, but late first round, you're getting a steal and you're getting two of them on top of that as well, too. That could shore up two of your biggest needs.
Yeah, no, I like Ibikite first of all. That's a very, very good pick, and I agree. That's your two needs here, back to back, 29 and 30. You're wanting to get both needs knocked out, and you have that opportunity. Now, because they brought in Marcus Valdez-Scantling along with Juju, I think they can actually take a flyer here with one of their picks and do kind of what the Cowboys did with Jalen Smith, and that's pick up somebody who's injured. Which I'm looking at one of the two Alabama receivers now, John Mechie or Jameson Williams coming out. You need a replacement for Tyreek? There you go. Right there. He's going to – Jameson Williams. Could you imagine Jameson Williams just torching teams? Like just absolutely burning teams down the middle in a seam, in a slot. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Now, if you look at it at pass rush, I look at two guys. Kingsley Enagbare, the South Carolina edge defender. I think he's still fantastic. Obviously, he had a rough combine, but it wasn't as bad as a lot of teams made it out to be. And then I'm also going to go look at Nick Bonito, the guy out of Oklahoma. As an outside linebacker, he's a dual edge type of guy. He can drop into coverage. He can go rush the passer. And we saw him firsthand during the combine. And, oh, boy, you want to talk about another guy who could move. Nick Bonito is a guy that can move. Honestly, if it wasn't for the defensive end out of Virginia Tech, he would have had the fastest 40 of the day. So, he is a next-level athlete and could easily improve what Kansas City tries to do. And you get a speed rusher off the edge. We've already seen what speed rushers can do. You mentioned Oa. There's also Micah Parsons last year as rookies, both torturing offenses. I mean, just that extra speed element does give an extra added, oh no, what do I do type of thing to an offensive line. So those are two guys I look at for that pass rush situation. But I think for a receiver, you go look at John Mechie, you go look at Jameson Williams, you take a flyer on them and see if you can get them once they're healthy into the offense, because you have really good talent there right now. Juju, is still going to be fine to play once the season starts. He's not going to be the guy that's going to be the banger over the top. That's going to be Marcus Valdez-Scantling for now. But then you bring in Jameson Williams or John Mechie into that team, and you add them to it. I think that's the mix for Kansas City that they want to do. I don't think you need to go get a trade for a number one guy. I think you can build it through the draft just fine.
Absolutely. I'm just imagine Mecole Hardman on one side, Jameson Williams on the other side, both just running straight up the field. And if you put the safeties over the top, you got Juju and Travis Kelce destroying the middle of the field, maybe throwing Valdez-Scantling running a deep seam of his own up the middle as well. So that's a whole lot of speed terrorizing down the field. And if you somehow cover all of that, you're leaving Travis Kelce one-on-one with somebody who cannot guard Travis Kelce, most likely.
Yeah, you're leaving Travis Kelce with 10 to 15 yards of wide open space at the first down marker, or Juju 10 to 15 yards wide open space at the first down marker. Both guys you don't want to leave open. We've seen both of them split the defense and go run off a 45-yard touchdown run by just turning around to the first down marker and there's nobody near them and they get ahead of steam and they're like, all right, well, you're not going to tackle me now. So
I am kind of curious too when we look at this. Obviously, the last few years it's been backyard street football, it feels like, for the Chiefs, cranked up to 10 with Tyreek Hill and those type of guys. I wonder what these type of receivers, let's say they bring in a Jameson Williams who can obviously burn with the best of them as well too. He can run like everyone, not saying he's slow, but he's not like Tyreek Hill game breaker yet. We haven't seen it, so we're not going to give him that status yet. Valdez-Scantling who can get deep, Juju who can work the middle field. Maybe we see the Chiefs work more towards a structured type offense as well too, a little bit less, a little bit more locked in how it's supposed to be. And I wonder if that'll be beneficiary or if it might hurt, because we've seen Patrick Mahomes sometimes kind of struggle in those structures if it doesn't hit perfectly, and you see him start to do that scrambling around trying to Russell Wilson and trying to make the backyard plays. But we also saw in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago against the Bills, when he's coming off that head injury, everything was structured to a T. There was no backyard, it was all locked in. And that was arguably one of the best games of his career too. So I'm really curious to see if these new if the way they rebuild this, if it ends up benefiting him or if it ends up exposing that hole in his game as well too about staying on track and that sort of thing and not screw it Tyreek out there somewhere. So I'm really curious to see what moves they make here to supplement that. Maybe they take back-to-back offensive linemen here and say, you know what, Patty, you're gonna have plenty of time to do whatever you want. These guys will eventually get loose. You're not getting touched though.
Yeah, and that is a possibility as well. I don't. That's my lesser possibility of all the things.
Very
But I
low
will
on my
say that I
expected
think
list
if
too.
Patty is going to take that next step, he has to learn how to play under a more structured offensive system for his health, not for any other reason than for his health. As fantastic as we love seeing him scrambling, making plays, throwing from a absolute horizontal angle with a submarine style delivery and dropping it 40 yards on the dot to his receiver just for his receiver to drop it. As fantastic as that is to watch, that adds extra hits on a quarterback's life. And if you can minimize hits, that's the goal for a quarterback. You do not want to get hit, whether it's by the ground or by another player, every play.
Especially a guy who's starting to get a little bit of an injury history and some knickknacks are starting to pile up as well too. Came out of college with a little bit of concerns, and now they just keep kind of piling up and piling up. So you put a lot of money into him, you might as well find ways to get it to work as well too. So a lot of interesting spots here for the Chiefs picking at the back end of the first round. Looking forward to see what they're doing. The rest of this division, we don't got a lot of early picks because they traded them all away. They hauled them all away. So we'll go and get started. We'll take a look at the Broncos first as well too. And the Broncos, we kind of talked about the biggest addition for the biggest loss for the Seahawks earlier. Well, that's the big addition for the Broncos, bringing in Russell Wilson. You got who you presume is going to be your franchise quarterback for another few years as well, too. The first one, arguably since Peyton Manning, the guy that you put under center and you feel good about. And then you do lose Noah Fant, the tight end, who Russell doesn't throw to tight ends anyway. So it's a loss, but at the same time, what you gain in theory outweighs it. Well, you trade away your ones and your twos if I'm to bring in Russell. You're not picking too early. So when I look at Denver, you're going to be similar to the Rams, similar to the 49ers. You're going to be building for depth, basically, at this point. You like your starting 22 for the most part. You just want to – so I look at the Broncos. I think they need to add a little bit of linebacker depth. Just some guys that – their pass rush with bringing in Randy Gregory, having Chubb, I think they're going to be pretty decent at pass rush. Not going to be great, but they'll be all right. That secondary is still pretty good. You have guys like Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons. You got players on the back end. I think you just need something in the middle to deal with those tight ends like the Travis Kelce's, the Darren Wallers, and those guys over the middle. Keenan Allen, Juju Smith-Schuster work in the middle. You just need some guys in that middle level to help those back end. So I look for them to look for some linebacker depth, guys to put next to Josie Jewell, others like that as well too. So give me some linebacker depth for the Broncos, but you pretty much already used your first two draft picks on Russell Wilson at this point. You're just kind of loading up in case somebody gets nicked or banged up.
Yeah, I mean, their first pick is 64. I do want to mention that there's a possibility that Ojabu does fall here, just because with that injury, you never know what teams are going to do. You obviously know his talent, but he was such a spark in the pan talent as far as it wasn't a long-term talent. Like he did it. Really, it's been this last season has been his biggest uptick. He did well the season before, but it wasn't to this level, right? So I look at maybe he falls down here, but I'm agreeing. Like, yeah, I think linebacker, edge linebacker, inside linebacker, one of the two. One of the three, I guess you can say, nowadays with the positioning are all good. Maybe he's a Kobe McLean in the second or third round from Auburn. Maybe he gets picked up here. Jake Lucetta from Penn State, we saw what he did against really every team, whether it be a Big Ten team or an Auburn team, whether it's matching up with a tight end or matching up with a slot receiver. He did a fantastic job, or just getting after the passer. I mean, he did it all. Maybe he steps up here into a second or third round pick. I mean, they have 5 picks between the second and fourth round. So there's options there to fill in those linebacker roles. After that, look at your offensive line. Help Quinn Miners out in the interior of that offensive line. Obviously, he's not the only one. There's a fantastic center there. I'm just saying you need long-term health for your offensive line, not just short-term.
And you want to keep Russell Wilson from having to run around as much as well. So you want to mitigate his running around as much as you possibly
can. You have to figure out a way to block for 20 seconds. I mean, that's your new goal as an offensive lineman.
Pretty much, yeah, unless Russell's going to change the way he plays as well, too. But we'll have to wait and see on that one as well, too. We'll have to see if he turns into catch, snap, throw, read, delivered. Like, we'll see how that one goes as well, too. So we're in agreement on that one. You're looking for depth if you're the Broncos, which that's going to take us to the last team in the AFC or in the AFC West. And we're looking at the Raiders who, well, they traded their first and their second round pick away as well, too, to bring in their biggest addition, Devontae Adams, the almost if he's not number one receiver in the NFL, he's almost universally regarded as top 2 or 3. You're not going to find him much lower than 3 just about anywhere. Reuniting with his good friend Derek Carr as well, too, back in Las Vegas. Biggest loss? Well, honestly, their entire offensive line, they still have to do some re-signings and reworking there as well, too, because everyone who started last year minus Alex Leatherwood is on the free agent market right now. So they're going to have to put together an offensive line. And then Yannick Ngakoue, who had a resurgent season opposite Max Crosby. They did bring in Chandler Jones. We'll see if that kind of balances that out a little bit. But looking at the Raiders, you don't have anything early at this point. It is everything we said about the other teams. You are supplementing at the back end of the draft to fill your roster spots. Maybe you get a dime in the rough. I think it's kind of a straightforward here. They just need to grab offensive linemen. If you draft 4 offensive linemen with your picks rounds 3 through 7, one of them hits, that's a spot you don't have to fill. The rest of them could just be depth spots as well. But I think you have to go heavy on the offensive line here. You have maybe the best set of receivers in the division, honestly, when you include Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, Kenyon Drake out of the backfield with Josh Jacobs. You can make a case they have the best set of skill players, which is surprising to say in a division with the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Chargers. You have maybe even not the best pass rush, but probably the second best pass rush with Max Crosby and now Chandler Jones as well too. Some of the interior guys like Maurice Hurst. But you gotta find a way to protect Derek Carr. He might be the least mobile out of all these quarterbacks as well too. And as great as he is, you got to keep him standing upright so he could deliver strikes. And when he gets to that protection, he can still throw darts with the best of them. So load up that offensive line, whatever you got to do. Get 5 guys in front of him that can avoid getting a holding penalty or a false start every other play and keep him upright so he can throw darts to Renfrow, Devontae, and Darren Waller all over the place.
Yeah, no, yeah. I don't know what else to say other than yes, because I've been preaching about this offensive line for Las Vegas, formerly Oakland. I almost said Oakland again, so I have to just always throw that out there. Yeah, I think it's been offensive line for me this entire offseason for the Raiders. Like, I need you to get offensive line. I need you to figure out your offensive line because right now you have a walking penalty in Alex Leatherwood. That's not going to help you. I'm going to throw out a couple names. They don't have anybody. They don't have any pick until the 3rd round, so these guys are going to be hopefully still sitting there. Austin Deculus out of LSU. Thayer Munford out of Ohio State. Both guys that career-wise, really good careers, long careers, but they're not guys that you look at as a top tier type of tackle, but they're a guy that sneak in there at the back end of like a top 20 version of the tackle depth right now. Maybe you look at guards and maybe you go Luke Matthews, Texas A&M, or he could slide into center as well. So, maybe he sits there. There's not a lot of guys that are going to be available in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round for them to fill in that are going to be quality talents. But there are some guys that could be some nice NFL players for 5 to 6 years. Nick Ford out of Utah, potentially at center. So being one of them. Like he might fall to 82 or 84 when you get that first pick. So maybe you take that.
Very rarely do you draft from the back end of the 3rd round onward and grab a blue chip prospect necessarily. Most of the time they get snatched up by that point as well too. So at that point you're looking to draft a guy who is going to be better in the NFL than he was in college, almost like a guy who with that next step improves his game as well too. And I kind of want to look at free agency as well too with the Raiders as well, since they have a little bit of leeway. I'm surprised they haven't made any offensive line moves. I know they're playing with the cap space. They just gave Devontae Adams the Brinks truck and a bag attached to it as well. Maybe a few bags attached to it. I'm surprised they haven't made a whole lot of moves in free agency offense. Just some like maybe a cheap 1-year signing here, 1-year signing there. Maybe a guy like Eric Fisher or something like that. Just guys that are chilling out there. Nate Solders, just lower level guys, not great by any means, but you just like you said, you got to put bodies in front of them. Unless Alex Leatherwood's going to erase the penalties and block 5 guys at a time next year, they got to get bodies out in front of them. So maybe they have some late free agency moves to kind of supplement those. But I agree with you. It is surprising how they've neglected the offensive line as much as they have when Derek Carr is at one point was considered a skittish quarterback in the pocket if it starts to break down. So I look for them to find a way to somehow build something in front of him as well. And what's the point of having Devontae Adams as $150 million if Derek Carr is face down on the ground the entire game?
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe you go out there and you get a couple guys like Dwayne Brown. Like he's a 37-year-old, but you get him for a year, maybe 2. Eric Fisher, like you said, 31-year-old. There you go. You get your tackles. Beyond that, you're looking at, well, not a whole lot left. So James Daniels, potentially, Connor Williams, maybe. There's not a lot if we're being fair, but yeah, there's enough that you can fill. you can have a better offensive line in what's currently available in free agency than you had last year when you made the playoffs. So
There
I
you
don't know.
go.
Spend a little money. Maybe they're just rentals. Maybe you back end the deal for like a 3-year contract and you back end it so that way it's opposite Devontae, or front end it so it's opposite Devontae. However, you have to do those magical, mysterious salary cap gymnastics that the Saints pulled off the other, last year. Like you guys are capable of doing it. You have enough lawyers in your office to be able to pull off a fantastic salary cap gymnastic meet and be okay. Like just get it done.
Absolutely. And you know what? We kind of went through a lot of teams. I want to backtrack a little bit because there's one idea we didn't really broach too much. And I'm looking at the Kansas City Chiefs with their 2 first-round picks. What are the chances you think they package those together and maybe move up and go after somebody? Let's hypothetically say they fall in love with Chris Olave, who's slipping at like 22, 23, somewhere there. Do you think there's a chance they might trade up for him, or maybe, God, for some reason, Jordan Davis slips and like, we want him next to Chris Jones so no one can, the middle is over. Do you think there's a chance maybe the Chiefs could trade up? And if you do, what kind of player do you want to see them go get?
Interestingly, I've been looking at it, and I look at the Giants picks potentially as a place where they could go and move up into a top 10
Oh,
type
you
of
think they
pick.
go way, way up there? You're thinking they go
I,
all the way up.
I think with 2 first rounders, you can easily slide yourself into, I don't know, that 7 pick with the Giants, and you flip that, you probably have to give them like your back end draft picks as well. But you could possibly go way up there and maybe get a position piece that you want to have, maybe an offensive lineman for the future. Maybe I don't know, defensive tackle. Whatever you want to do. It's a possibility they do it. I wouldn't be surprised if they also work a deal in Philadelphia as well. But I think at that point in time, if you're moving up, if you're Kansas City, I think you're taking like best absolute available player because he fell, like George Karlaftis if he falls. Like you're going to get that type of a guy, you know?
I'm curious about this. You mentioned Philadelphia picking in like the teens. Imagine if they trade up to like maybe that 18-ish spot or something like that right afterwards. Maybe a guy like Trevor Penning, the offensive tackle out of UNI as well, too, who's climbed up a lot of boards. And obviously we kind of talked about, you put a lot of money in the offensive line the last year. You got Creed Humphrey, Joe Tooney, Orlando Brown. Like you got good players, but maybe just grabbing a Trevor Penning so your tackles are locked down. You built that wall in front of Patrick Mahomes like we joked about earlier. And be like, look, your receiver, you don't have Tyreek Hill, but you still have the best tight end in the game and a bunch of other really, really good guys. No one's going to touch you. Make it happen. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, get your 5'6" self behind these mammoths and just kind of dance around. You won't get touched for 4 yards. Or whoever they have playing running backs. They seem to rotate them all over the place. So I don't hate the idea of them trading up if they go and get the right player. But if you trade up and you whiff or you're slightly off or you grab something that doesn't make sense, I think that sets you back in this division. You can't miss if you trade up. That's the biggest thing. You can't swing and miss, where with these 2 first-round picks, you can maybe miss on one and smash the other one, or both are just pretty decent players. Like, yeah, Patrick Mahomes, there's a lot of leeway, but you can't mess up when you have 2 first-round picks and trade up like this, especially if you have to give up like the second or a third or something like that too to get all the way up there. So I am really for the first time in a while, what the Chiefs do in the draft should be fun, because normally it's just like, whatever, they're picking at the end. Who cares?
Yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if they somehow package at least one of them to Houston. I can see both first round picks going to Houston. They take their 13 from that was originally Cleveland's, and Houston takes the back end of the draft because Houston has to get players at this point in time. So that wouldn't surprise me in the least either if they just like do something with Houston.
That'd be great. That'd be great for Houston, because you also have your top 10 picks still. You got you have 3 or 4 if I'm not mistaken. Then you have those 2 picks at the back end. Then you got your early pick in the first round as well too. So you're picking like 3 times an 8 to 9 picks. So that's underratedly good for a team that, as you mentioned, they need bodies.
Yeah.
Davis Mills, they said, is their guy for at least a year, but you got to give him something. I mean, like you can't have him thrown to nobodies anymore.
4 picks within the first 40 picks. Like that's not a bad haul, to say the least.
Yeah, not at all as well too. And it's going to continue. It's not just this year. You're going to have plenty of picks next year and the year after that as well too. Like you had a nice haul in that Deshaun Watson trade. So we'll see if David Mills is the guy. They are going to give him every opportunity in a division that is interesting, to say the least, as well too. Like it's a very interesting division, which we'll be talking about the South. Don't you worry about that. We got a lot to talk about those as well too, and the rest of the divisions coming up as well too. So that will do it for the main event here, talking our first episode of Journey to the Draft, which will lead right up to our final mock draft right before the NFL draft starts. We'll also be releasing our top 50 player big boards we'll be each releasing one this year as well too, so you take a look at those. We will let you know where to check those out once we have them finished and released. It is that time of the season. The NFL draft season is always busy, but it is always fun. And we will continue this journey to the draft beginning again next week. But that will take us now into Kelsey's actual favorite segment of every show, and that is Crunch Time. Currently brought to you by Swift Lifestyles. Use High-Low Sports as the code. Get yourself 15% off and get us one step closer to creating our own flavor as well too. So, Kelsey, we're in crunch time. What's on your mind? What's got you crunching?
For me, there's not been a lot lately, but I do know that there's something on your mind, and I kind of want to. I'm just going to leeway this into. I'm going to drop the bottom line, and I'm going to let you have the crunch time because, truthfully, the things I have to talk about aren't important. But this story is pretty important.
Yeah, and you know what? I have problems with this one across the board. So anyone who hasn't heard, George Masvidal and Colby Covington, 2 UFC fighters, big grudge match. They had it in UFC main event a couple weeks ago. Ended. Well, it didn't end quite there. Just the other day at a steakhouse in Miami, George Masvidal allegedly showed up with a hood and a mask on and attacked Colby Covington with, I believe they said, was 2 sucker punches allegedly. Did some damage to a tooth and then took off. And then he was later arrested and is now being charged as well too by what is presumed to be Colby Covington. It has not been directly proved yet. He used his rights to basically deny being identified. But I'm so many issues with to start with. George, you had 25 minutes with him like a couple weeks ago and it didn't get done. So you show up and sucker punch him while covered and hooded up as well too. That it's not proving anything. Colby, you're a UFC fighter who has talked the most amount of trash ever, and now you're pressing charges. Like any other time, like I get pressing charges, especially against the guy who you hate, because this kind of puts them in a spot as well too. Like this is basically double flipping them off. But damn, with how much you talk, it does make you kind of look smelly. If that makes sense, it's not a great look. And at the same time, this is just ugly. Like it was at first, it was fun. The back and forth was fun. The friends turn rivals was great. Now it's kind of embarrassing. I'm just kind of worn out from it. I don't want to see either one of their names for a few more weeks or even months, honestly, which is a shame because they were 2 of the best fighters in that division in the world. And right now I'm just kind of sick of them both. And this is kind of embarrassing, honestly, as well, too. Just on from both sides is absolutely embarrassing.
Yeah, like it's interesting to talk about it because you have guys like Kamaru Usman saying, I'm not going to take a side on this. They're both idiots. Like you have Joe Rogan being the voice of reason here and saying, Masvidal, you should have just accepted your big L the other day when you couldn't get it done in 25 minutes. As much to what you just said, DJ. Like, what are you doing? Like, I get your street, street Jesus, game bred, all that stuff, but like,
if that's the case, you square him up in the street and fight him. You don't sucker punch and then run away. Like it loses all of your mystique of being the as you mentioned, street Jesus and all that. Kind of loses a little bit when you run up, sucker punch, and take off, and then you show up with other people as well too at a steakhouse of all things.
Dude, yeah, and that's the thing. Is like this is a steakhouse full of families and kids and probably some grown adults imbibing in some alcoholic beverages. But like, I don't care how no amount of liquid courage. If you're a professional fighter and your fists can legally be classified as weapons, no amount of liquid, whatever you want to call it, it should allow you to just want to run up and sucker punch a dude, no matter how big of a rival these guys are. I mean, how many times have we heard it from different UFC athletes saying like, yeah, me and Covington can't meet in the streets. Like
it's on site. Well, congratulations. It's on site. You square up and you fight there. You don't sucker punch and dip. And at the same time, you can't press charges too. Like, come on, you talk way too much trash. I hate this all around. And I hate that we're talking about, but we can't just leave this uncaged thing to its end. But that is, you know what? We're going to get out of here before we start going on a rant and this turns into a 2-hour show. But we appreciate you all for joining us. Go to Belly Up Media as well, too. Vote for us in the March Madness bracket for podcasts as well, too. We're in a tight race as well. Give us a vote. We'd greatly appreciate that. And until next time, we will see you guys later.